It begins with a simple question, one that sits quietly in the back of the mind until something strange, beautiful, or impossible brings it forward. How far can life bend before it breaks? And across the planet, scattered from mountain moss to the blackest depths of the sea, are creatures that seem to exist just outside the margins of biological expectation. They don't simply adapt. They twist the rules, cheat the limits, and reveal that the world is always more surprising than we remember. I first encountered this idea not through a scientific paper, but through a photograph. A pale, grinning creature with feathery gills hovered in a tank of dim blue water, looking equal parts ancient and newborn. It wasn't trying to be strange. It simply was. That moment opened the door to a larger realization. Evolution is not a tidy sequence of improvements. It is a wandering conversation between life and environment, full of detours and experiments. Some of those experiments survive. A few of them thrive so brilliantly that they challenge everything we think we understand about the boundaries of nature. Each of these animals carries a story that defies expectations. Some remain perpetually young, as if time itself is optional. Others patch themselves together after unimaginable injury, as though equipped with an internal workshop of spare parts. A few live in near total darkness, shaping their lives around pressure, silence, and hunger. Some can withstand extremes that resemble science fiction scenarios more than earthly reality, and others simply choose to perform, to mimic, to impersonate, to reshape sound and identity in ways that blur the line between intention and instinct. What binds them together is not size or environment or common ancestry, it is the quiet audacity of their existence. They remind us that biology is not a fixed script. It is a restless, improvisational art form, a system guided not by perfection, but by possibility. When confronted with each creature's story, the mind wants to ask the same question again and again. How is this even possible? Yet the answers, when they emerge, are rarely loud or dramatic. They are subtle, elegant, and often humbling. Consider the environments that shape these lives. Some of the most bizarre adaptations unfold high in the rainforest canopy, where every inch of leaf and shadow matters. Others rise from the black water of ancient lakes or from sand-swallowed burrows tucked beneath African heat. And many begin far below the surface of our understanding, literally in ocean zones where pressure grinds metal, where light never reaches, and where creatures must either innovate or disappear. Every adaptation tells a story not only of survival, but of creativity. The world is not merely endured, it is interpreted. A fish turns darkness into strategy. A microscopic creature makes a truce with near death. A mammal evolves armor instead of aggression. These are not just curiosities. They are examples of life-solving problems in ways we would never imagine if we were limited to our own perspective. This series is not about shock or spectacle. Instead, it is an invitation to step into a slower, more contemplative frame of mind, to follow the thread of mystery into revelation, and then to sit with the reflection that follows. As you hear each chapter, you may find yourself revisiting familiar ideas about aging, transformation, survival, even identity, and seeing them through new eyes. Because in the end, these animals are more than outliers. They are reminders of a deeper truth. The world is never finished, never fully known, and never limited to the boundaries we draw for it. And perhaps, as we move through their stories, we may discover something of ourselves, our resilience, our curiosity, our own quiet longing to understand what lies just beyond the expected. It starts in a lake, not far from Mexico City. The sun hangs low, scattering gold across the ripples. Below the surface, hidden among reeds and water lilies, a creature hovers, a kind of ghost with gills. It looks like it never finished becoming what it was supposed to be. And that's exactly the point. Meet the axolotl. This aquatic salamander seems caught in a moment of perpetual youth, frozen in time while everything else rushes forward. Its frilly gills plume like underwater feathers. Its wide, curious eyes sit above a smile that never fades. But don't be fooled by its cartoonish appearance. The axolotl isn't just unusual, it's a biological contradiction, a living question mark. Where most amphibians undergo a clear metamorphosis, losing gills, sprouting lungs, and heading for dry land, the axolotl opts out. It reaches adulthood without ever leaving the water. No lungs, no migration, no transformation. It stays exactly as it began, an aquatic juvenile with the power to reproduce. In scientific terms, this is called neoteny, but in the language of story, it's something stranger, eternal youth made real. Its refusal to grow up, however, is only the beginning. The axolotl's most astonishing ability lies in its response to injury. Lose a leg? It grows back. An eye, a chunk of its heart, even sections of its brain, all regenerated, not patched, not scarred, rebuilt exactly as before. And it can do this repeatedly. Beneath that smooth skin is a secret arsenal, stem cells. While most creatures lose the flexibility of these master cells shortly after birth, axolotls keep them for life. When injury strikes, these cells gather at the wound, forming a structure that reads like an ancient set of blueprints. And then, quietly, precisely, the body rebuilds itself, bone to nerve to skin. To scientists, it's a marvel, a glimpse of a biological toolkit humans barely understand. Could we unlock similar powers in ourselves? Could axolotls offer clues to healing spinal injuries, heart disease, or even neurodegeneration? In labs around the world, the smiling faces of these aquatic paradoxes swim in tanks, under microscopes, beside questions no one yet can answer. But there's a twist. This Peter Pan of evolution can, under the right conditions, be forced to grow up. Inject it with thyroid hormones or iodine, and its body will suddenly obey the script it once rejected. The gills vanish, lungs inflate, legs strengthen. It walks onto land like its cousins, and it begins to die. This induced adulthood comes with a cost, a shortened lifespan. Forced to become what it was never meant to be, the axolotl fades, as if it knew something we didn't, as if staying young wasn't a flaw, but a secret path to longevity. In its still waters, the axolotl raises profound questions about time, about identity, about whether growing up is always the right path. Perhaps the rules of development aren't as fixed as we think. Perhaps transformation is a choice, one not every creature needs to make. Or maybe it's a reflection of something deeper, that survival doesn't always mean changing. Sometimes it means knowing exactly what not to become. As it drifts through its ancient lake, smiling, healing, refusing to grow, the axolotl reminds us not all evolution moves forward. Sometimes the wisest thing a species can do is stay still. Imagine a creature stitched together by a committee with no shared vision. Fur, bill, webbed feet, eggs, venom. A biological riddle so strange, early scientists thought it had to be fake. This is the platypus, a living mosaic of contradictions that shouldn't make sense, yet does. In the still streams of eastern Australia, the platypus glides silently, low in the water, eyes closed. It doesn't need to see. Its soft, rubbery bill, unlike anything on a duck, is alive with sensors. It reads the water like braille, detecting the electric whispers of insect muscles, the subtle pulses of hidden shrimp. Eyes, ears, and nostrils shut tight. It hunts in total darkness, and yet it never misses. What exactly is the platypus? Mammal, yes, but it lays eggs, no nipples, yet it feeds its young with milk that seeps from its skin. Its tail resembles a beaver's, its walk a lizard's. And beneath its rear ankles, spurs tipped with venom capable of causing pain that resists morphine. This venom isn't for defense. It's a weapon of rivalry. During mating season, males duel with poison daggers, fighting not to kill, but to warn. To the European naturalists who received the first specimen in 1799, this animal was an outrage. They searched for stitches. Literally. It had to be a hoax, some clever taxidermist's prank. But the stitches never appeared. The platypus was real, and it was rewriting the rules of what it meant to be a mammal. Its genetics are equally bizarre. Sequencing its genome revealed a tangle of ancestry that crosses the boundaries between birds, reptiles, and mammals. It has 10 sex chromosomes, 5 pairs that dance in a complex chain during reproduction. For comparison, humans have 2. The platypus defies even our most basic binary categories. Reproduction is its own story. The female digs a long, spiraling burrow in the riverbank. She lays leathery eggs and curls around them for warmth. When they hatch, the babies, called puggles, lick milk pooled in grooves on her skin. She has no teats. She sweats nourishment. All this eccentricity makes the platypus a kind of evolutionary time capsule. A relic from a moment when the path of mammals hadn't yet settled, when nature was still experimenting with possibilities. It didn't win by fitting in. It thrived by holding on to its oddities. To see a platypus in motion is to witness a quiet kind of genius. Nothing wasted, nothing accidental. Every strange feature solves a problem. The bill finds prey in murky water. The fur insulates. The venom enforces social order. The egg-laying is a memory of origins, still pulsing in the present. In a world that favors specialization, the platypus chose synthesis. Instead of picking a lane, it made its own. It is a walking rebuttal to the idea that nature is orderly, progressive, or neat. What does it mean to be real, to belong, to fit the mold? The platypus seems to whisper, perhaps the mold is the illusion. Perhaps what lasts is what dares to be different. In the shadowed waters of dawn, as mist clings to the banks and the surface goes still again, the platypus vanishes beneath. Not mysterious by design, but by nature. A question that never fully answers itself. And maybe that's its greatest gift, to remain unsolved, so that wonder has a reason to continue. The descent begins slowly. Light fades, pressure builds, and sound is swallowed by the sea. We pass the photic zone, slip past the twilight, and enter the midnight. Here, in the abyssal black, where sunlight has never reached, lives a creature sculpted by necessity and nightmare. The anglerfish. At first glance, she looks like a monster drawn from some ancient mariner's hallucination. A cavernous mouth rimmed with inward-facing teeth, a body soft and shadowy, a single glowing filament dangling from her forehead like a ghost's lantern. But this horror has a purpose. Every grotesque detail is an answer to the question, how do you survive where almost nothing lives? The anglerfish's lure is not her own light. It is home to bioluminescent bacteria, tiny companions that glow in exchange for safety and nutrients. She can manipulate their light, waving her bait like a puppet in the dark. The illusion is irresistible. Prey come closer, curious. Closer, until the mouth snaps open wider than seems possible, swallowing them whole. It's over in a flash. But digestion, like everything in the deep, takes time. Her stomach stretches to accommodate meals larger than herself. Her bones are flexible, her flesh gelatinous. In this world of scarcity, you eat whatever and whenever you can. Yet, as terrifying as her appearance may be, the anglerfish's most unsettling truth lies not in her hunger, but in her love life. Males are born small, weak, and desperate. They do not hunt. They do not glow. Their sole purpose is to find a female, no easy task in the vast black sea. Guided by scent and luck, when one finally finds her, he latches on with his teeth. And then, slowly, he vanishes. His skin fuses to hers. His blood merges with her bloodstream. His organs wither away, leaving only testes. He becomes part of her body, permanently. A biological appendage. A passenger. A sperm donor fused to her side for life, and she may carry several of them. This phenomenon, sexual parasitism, is both astonishing and unsettling. It's not romance. It's evolutionary surrender. The male gives up everything in exchange for a chance to reproduce. He becomes less than himself. She becomes more. Why this brutal arrangement? Because here, in the loneliest zone of Earth's oceans, meeting even one mate is a miracle. This fusion ensures no opportunity is wasted. The anglerfish is not an aberration. She is a testament to life's relentlessness, a sculpted survivor of an alien world beneath our own. She teaches us that beauty is not always soft, and success does not always look like freedom. There is a strange kind of grace in her existence, in the efficiency of her hunting, in the cruel intimacy of her reproduction, in the way her life writes itself around the silence. To float in this darkness is to accept another kind of truth, that survival in its purest form is often quiet, strange, and utterly indifferent to our ideas of how things should be. And yet she endures. Not by light, but by creating it. Not by love, but by fusing with it. In the deep, the anglerfish reigns, not as a monster, but as a queen. Now we turn our lens not to the deep, but to the microscopic, a speck of life so small it could sit unnoticed in a single drop of dew. Yet within that speck lives a legend, a creature so durable it challenges our very ideas about what it means to be alive. Meet the tardigrade. Also known as the water bear or moss piglet, it ambles with slow determination through droplets and soil grains. 8 stubby legs, claws like grappling hooks, a snout like a vacuum. It looks harmless, even clumsy. But this creature holds a title few others can claim: indestructible. Tardigrades are extremophiles, survivors in the harshest conditions known. Frozen in Antarctic ice, they endure. Boiled in volcanic springs, no problem. Crushed under pressures greater than the deepest ocean trenches, still moving. Blasted by cosmic radiation in the vacuum of space. They float on, unbothered. In 2007, a group of tardigrades was sent to orbit Earth aboard a European satellite. They were exposed to space itself, its vacuum, radiation, and silence. Days later, returned and rehydrated, they stirred. And they reproduced. The secret to their survival lies in a process called cryptobiosis. When threatened, a tardigrade shuts down. It retracts its legs, expels water, and curls into a dry, near-lifeless ball called a ton. In this state, its metabolism slows to a whisper. Less than 0.001% of normal. Time, for all practical purposes, stops. Inside this ton, the tardigrade cells are protected by a suite of unique proteins and sugars that form a glass-like shell around critical structures. DNA is shielded. Membranes stabilized. Damage paused. And they wait, not for minutes or hours, but years, decades even. When water returns, the ton unfurls. The tardigrade reawakens. It stretches. It moves. And then it begins again, as if no time has passed. In recent studies, scientists have even inserted tardigrade proteins into human cells in the lab. Those cells became more resistant to radiation. The implications are staggering. Could this microscopic wanderer hold keys to medicine, to space travel, to the limits of life itself? But the tardigrade doesn't know any of this. It isn't special by ambition. It simply is. It persists because it must. Because it has learned, over 500 million years of quiet survival, how to wait, how to withstand. They live almost everywhere: mountain moss, forest soil, rooftop gutters, possibly on your windowsill, asleep in a flake of lichen. Not rare, just overlooked. But perhaps that's their final paradox. The most resilient life on Earth is not hidden in secret chambers or locked in vaults. It is drifting beside us, unnoticed. In a world that often glorifies speed, power, and dominance, the tardigrade offers another path, one built on patience, on silence, on the deep, slow rhythm of endurance. We like to think that resilience looks like strength, but maybe it looks like stillness. Maybe it looks like a tiny creature curled in a speck of dust, waiting for the storm to pass. And maybe the future belongs not to those who rush, but to those who know how to stop and survive. There's a face you've probably seen before, droopy, gelatinous, almost comical in its melancholy. It went viral. It became a meme. The world laughed. The blobfish, it was voted the world's ugliest animal, a symbol of aquatic awkwardness. But that image, the one we've all seen, is not what the blobfish actually looks like. It's a distortion, a photograph taken out of context, a picture of suffering, not of nature. In its true home, thousands of feet below the ocean surface off the coasts of Australia and Tasmania, the blobfish is something else entirely. There, under immense pressure, up to 120 times greater than at sea level, it floats with quiet grace just above the sea floor. Its body, soft and gelatinous, is perfectly calibrated to that pressure. It doesn't swim so much as hover, conserving energy in a world where food is scarce and movement costly. It has no swim bladder, no rigid bones. Its flesh is slightly less dense than water, allowing it to drift in place, waiting for bits of organic matter to fall from above, crabs, mollusks, whatever the deep sea offers. It's a model of efficiency, a master of minimalism. But when pulled from its pressure-rich habitat by fishing trawlers, tragedy unfolds. The rapid change causes its body to expand, collapse, and distort. The result is the saggy caricature we know. That viral image is not biology. It's trauma. It's a corpse. And yet, despite that misunderstanding, the blobfish's life is full of unexpected beauty. Unlike many deep-sea creatures, it shows signs of parental care. The female lays thousands of pink, delicate eggs in a nest on the seafloor and stays with them, hovering, guarding, cleaning. In a realm known for solitude and savagery, she is a patient protector. This quiet devotion, floating in the darkness, is a kind of poetry, a reminder that tenderness exists even in the most unlikely places. The blobfish challenges us, not with aggression or mystery, but with a confrontation of our own biases. We judged it based on our world, not its own. We saw a distorted image and called it ugly. But in its native pressure, in its element, it is perfectly formed, efficient, calm, a creature that wastes nothing. It lives in a space we rarely visit and barely understand. Yet we pulled it up, snapped a photo, and made it a punchline. What does that say about us? The blobfish doesn't fight back. It doesn't hide or perform. It simply exists, perfectly adapted to its alien home. And in that there's a kind of quiet defiance, a beauty that doesn't need our approval. Maybe the lesson here isn't about biology at all. Maybe it's about perception, about how easily we mistake unfamiliarity for flaw. How often we confuse suffering with design. In the deep sea, where light never reaches, the blobfish floats, still, serene, and misunderstood. Not a joke, not a monster, just an animal, doing exactly what it was meant to do. And maybe that's enough. In the moonlit forests of Asia and Africa, something ancient and armored moves with deliberate grace. Not a reptile, though it wears scales. Not a tank, though it can become one. This is the pangolin, sometimes called the walking pine cone or the artichoke with legs. It is a creature of silence, nocturnal, shy, and almost invisible to those who don't know where to look. Covered head to tail in overlapping scales made of keratin, the same material as our nails, or a rhino's horn, the pangolin's armor is its defining feature, but it's also its greatest vulnerability. When threatened, the pangolin does something remarkable. It doesn't run. It curls into a tight, impenetrable ball. Every edge of every scale locks into place. The soft underbelly vanishes. A lion can claw. A hyena can gnash. But the pangolin does not break. It waits. There's a quiet brilliance in this. A commitment to defense, not aggression. But that same evolutionary marvel has become its undoing. When poachers approach, the pangolin doesn't flee. It rolls up, perfectly still, easy to carry, easy to sell. Its meat is considered a delicacy. Its scales, ground into powder, are falsely believed to cure everything from arthritis to cancer. There is no science behind this, just myth, tradition, and market demand. Today, the pangolin is the most trafficked mammal on Earth, and yet most people have never even heard of it. But its story is not just one of tragedy. It is also a tale of evolutionary wonder. The pangolin has no teeth. Instead, it has a tongue that defies belief, thin, sticky, and longer than its entire body. When not in use, the tongue retracts deep into the chest, anchored near the pelvis. This strange anatomy serves one perfect purpose: feasting on ants and termites. With curved claws, the pangolin tears open mounds and logs. Then, in rapid flicks, it vacuums up thousands of insects, its tongue darting in and out with hypnotic speed. One pangolin can eat 20 million ants a year, a living pest control system wrapped in armor. And there's more. The pangolin is a devoted parent. A mother carries her pup on the base of her tail, never far from her protection. If danger comes, she curls around the baby, shielding it within her armored embrace. It is one of nature's most endearing acts of care. This creature, so ancient it predates the saber-tooth, is a paradox. Gentle yet resilient, odd yet elegant. A specialist that took a path almost no other mammal dared to follow. It didn't evolve claws for killing or teeth for tearing. It chose armor. It chose patience. It chose survival through retreat. And yet that path is now closing. All 8 species of pangolin are threatened with extinction, not because of climate, not because of competition, because of us. The pangolin does not ask for attention. It doesn't display. It doesn't roar. It simply wants to live in the quiet shadows, doing what it has done for millions of years. To lose it would be to erase a chapter of evolution's most imaginative writing. So perhaps the question is this: can we recognize the value of something not because it dazzles, but because it endures? Can we protect what we barely understand before it disappears into silence? The pangolin is waiting, still curled, still breathing, but not forever. It begins with a glimmer, barely noticeable, a dewdrop reflecting moonlight. But look closer. Perched on a leaf above a rainforest stream, a tiny frog clings to the underside of the green. It appears ordinary, lime-colored, and slight, until you turn it over. This is the glass frog, and it wears transparency as armor. Its belly is translucent, so clear you can see its heart beating beneath the skin. Its organs, delicate veins, even its unborn eggs are visible. This is not camouflage in the usual sense. It is disappearance through honesty. Scientists call it edge diffusion. When predators look down through the leaves, the frog's body allows light to pass through, blurring its silhouette. There's no hard outline, no clear target. It doesn't hide from the world. It blends with it. But there's something deeper happening here, something tender. After mating, the female lays her eggs on the underside of a leaf overhanging a stream. Then the male takes over. He remains. He watches. He waits. For days or weeks, he guards the fragile cluster, his tiny limbs clinging tightly to the leaf. His most critical task is hydration. If the eggs dry out, they die. So the male descends periodically to the water below. He drinks, he climbs back, and he moistens the eggs with his own soaked skin. In some species, he even urinates on them to keep them alive. This devotion is not grand. It is quiet, repeated, essential. And when the time comes, the tadpoles emerge, not in a burst of sound, but in a gentle fall. One by one, they wriggle free from the jelly and drop into the stream below, beginning a new chapter in a life already defined by subtlety. The glass frog is not trying to be seen. In fact, it thrives on being overlooked. But in that invisibility lies something remarkable. It asks us to rethink what skin is for, not just a barrier, but a window, not just protection, but exposure. To witness a glass frog is to see life in raw form, beating, digesting, gestating. It's a rare intimacy between observer and observed. No secrets, no armor, just biology in motion. Why evolve such transparency? Maybe because in a world of predators, being invisible is safer than being strong. Maybe because hiding in plain sight is the most elegant solution. But maybe there's another reason. Maybe the glass frog reminds us that the most beautiful things in nature don't demand attention. They don't roar or shimmer. They simply exist, perfectly tuned to the rhythms of rain, leaf, and moonlight. In a rainforest filled with color and noise, the glass frog is a whisper. And sometimes it's the whispers that stay with us the longest. Death is supposed to be the one certainty, the inescapable ending to every biological story. But somewhere in the warm waters of the Mediterranean and the Pacific, a jellyfish the size of a fingernail quietly rewrites that ending. Meet Turritopsis dohrnii, the immortal jellyfish. It drifts through the water, soft and translucent, unremarkable to the untrained eye. But when threatened, starved, or simply old, it performs a feat no other animal can. It turns back time, literally. Most jellyfish follow a one-way path: egg to larva to polyp to medusa, birth to maturity to death. But Turritopsis, when injured or aging, reverses that path. The adult collapses, its tissues reshaping, reforming, dissolving. It sinks to the ocean floor and becomes something else, a polyp again. The jellyfish, now a juvenile, starts life anew, genetically identical, biologically refreshed. This process is called transdifferentiation. It's not just healing, it's reprogramming. Specialized cells change identity, muscle becomes nerve, skin becomes stem, transforming into new roles with perfect precision. In theory, this cycle could repeat forever. Of course, immortality is not immunity. The jellyfish can still be eaten. It can still succumb to disease, but it will never die of old age. It doesn't wear out. It simply restarts. To scientists, this phenomenon is electrifying. What if aging is not a rigid decline, but a flexible process? What if cells don't degrade with time? They just forget how to reset. Research is ongoing. The molecular pathways of Turritopsis are being mapped, compared, questioned. Could the secrets of cellular renewal lie in this humble creature? Could we one day coax human tissues to regenerate, to reverse, to begin again? But beyond the science, there is something quietly profound about the jellyfish's choice. It doesn't fight death with aggression. It meets it with surrender and rebirth. It becomes soft. It becomes small. It returns to its beginning, trusting that life will flow forward once more. This is not an act of dominance, but of humility. Not power, but perspective. Perhaps there's a lesson here. That progress isn't always a straight line. That wisdom might live not in pushing ahead, but in knowing when to go back. That the end doesn't always have to be. In the gentle tides, the immortal jellyfish floats, part ghost, part seed, part mystery. A tiny echo of eternity moving through a sea that never stops. And in its silent cycle, it reminds us life is not a destination. It is a rhythm, and sometimes the rhythm starts again. In the bright shallows of coral reefs and tangled beds of seagrass, a tiny hunter prepares its weapon. It's no bigger than a paperclip, but what it's about to do borders on the impossible. This is the pistol shrimp. It has 2 claws, but one is enormous, disproportionate, like a spring-loaded hammer. At rest, the claw is cocked open, and then, with a sudden snap, it slams shut. But it's not the sound of the claws hitting that matters. It's what comes next. The force of the closure fires a jet of water so fast it creates a cavitation bubble, a microscopic void where pressure drops below vaporization. When the bubble collapses, it releases a shock wave, a flash of lightning, and a burst of heat that briefly rivals the temperature of the sun's surface. That's not exaggeration. For a fraction of a millisecond, the inside of the bubble exceeds 8,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The shrimp has weaponized fluid physics. The sound generated by this action is deafening on a tiny scale, reaching over 200 decibels, loud enough to stun or kill nearby prey. A crab, a small fish, even another shrimp, caught in the blast, simply stops moving. And the pistol shrimp collects its meal. This creature doesn't use brute force. It uses precision. It bends water to its will. It creates chaos from motion. But its talents don't stop there. If the larger claw is lost, the smaller one grows to take its place. The shrimp ricochet configures its weapon, shifting dominance to the other side. Adaptation on demand. And in the presence of many pistol shrimp, something else happens. A crackling chorus. Colonies create an underwater symphony of snaps and bursts. To submarines and sonar, it sounds like static. For decades, this noise baffled navies. The culprit? A shrimp, no longer than your finger. This is not merely survival, it's innovation. The pistol shrimp has found a way to harness invisible forces, shock waves, light pressure, and turn them into a hunting strategy. A weapon that would make engineers envious. There's something almost mythic about it. A David equipped not with a stone, but with an understanding of the fabric of water itself. In the quiet arms race of evolution, this shrimp isn't the biggest or the fastest, but it has mastered a different kind of power, the ability to shape its world with a gesture. It reminds us that the laws of physics are not barriers, they're opportunities, and that sometimes the smallest creatures wield the most astonishing tools. So, the next time you hear the soft crackle of a reef, listen closer. Somewhere beneath the coral, a pistol shrimp waits in silence, one claw raised, ready to snap. In the eucalyptus forests of Australia, a strange song echoes through the canopy. It's not the call of a bird, not exactly. It might sound like a chainsaw, or a car alarm, or a camera shutter clicking in rhythmic bursts. But it's none of those things. It's all of them. Meet the lyrebird, nature's greatest impersonator. This unassuming, ground-dwelling bird is not flashy at first glance. Its plumage is soft, earth-toned. Its movements are subtle, but its tail, when fanned, reveals its name, a curve like the ancient lyre harp. And its voice is a miracle of mimicry. The lyrebird can reproduce almost any sound it hears. Chainsaws, camera clicks, human voices, other birds, construction equipment. Not just approximations, perfect replications, down to the timbre, pitch, and rhythm. Some lyrebirds have even been recorded mimicking mobile phone ringtones, years after hearing them just once. Its vocal organ, the syrinx, is the most complex of any known bird. It allows dual tones, rapid shifts, overlapping layers. The result is a soundscape so rich it feels digitally constructed. But it's not. It's alive. And male lyrebirds use this astonishing talent for one purpose: to perform. During mating season, the male clears a small patch of forest floor. This is his stage. He fans his tail, struts with precision, and delivers a concert, a medley of forest noises woven into a narrative of complexity. The more convincing his mimicry, the more females he attracts. His art is his currency. But this isn't just mimicry. It's memory. Young lyrebirds learn by listening to elders, creating localized dialects. A lyrebird near a logging site will mimic engines and saws. One near a tourist path might echo human laughter. Each song is a time capsule, an acoustic record of place. It blurs the line between natural and artificial, between voice and echo. The lyrebird doesn't understand a camera, but it knows the sound is compelling. It folds it into its identity. It sings the world back to itself. And in doing so, it forces us to ask, what is imitation, really? What is originality when all creation is based on experience? The lyrebird is not just performing for mates, it's archiving. It's recording history in sound. If a forest disappears, its song may still survive in the throat of a bird that once lived there. It teaches us that art isn't always a matter of choice. Sometimes it's instinct, a survival strategy, a performance shaped by necessity, yes, but also by beauty. In a world increasingly filled with noise, the lyrebird listens, and then it sings it all back, flawless, haunting, unforgettable, a living echo with a voice of its own. In the quiet shallows where land meets water, beneath the rustling reeds and calm surface, the platypus drifts again into view. But this time, we're not seeing it as a curiosity. We're seeing it for what it really is, a time traveler. Evolution, we're taught, is a forward march, complexity rising from simplicity. But the platypus is a rebuttal to that narrative. It didn't evolve past the past. It carried it with pride. Its bill reads electricity in the water like Braille, giving it a sixth sense few other mammals possess. Its fur is dense and waterproof, its limbs webbed for silent gliding. It lays eggs like a reptile, produces milk like a mammal, and defends itself with venom like an insect. And yet it works. Perfectly. But here's what's even stranger. The platypus is not some outlier from a failed branch of evolution. It is thriving. It is doing what it has always done, quietly, effectively, and without apology. And that forces a larger question. What if evolution isn't about becoming something new? What if it's about staying exactly what you are, in a world that changes around you? Elsewhere, creatures are bending biology in other directions. Frogs with glass bellies that vanish into their leaves, shrimps snapping physics into plasma, microscopic bears curling into stasis for decades. And high above them all, a bird composes the sounds of civilization into a mating call. There is no single direction here, no straight line, just possibility. The lyrebird teaches us that identity is fluid. That memory can be carried in song. The jellyfish shows us that time can be reversed. The anglerfish fuses love and survival into a terrifying union. The pangolin, armored and tender, rolls into a question we can't answer. Each of these lives, so different in form and function, shares something fundamental. They ask us to look again, to question what is normal, to wonder what else we've missed, because behind every strange adaptation is not just a solution, but a story. A negotiation between an organism and its world, a moment of insight made flesh. In the end, evolution is not about perfection. It is about persistence. And these creatures, oddballs, outliers, paradoxes, have found ways to persist that defy logic, expectation, even gravity. They are the ones that didn't follow the script, and in doing so, they remind us that life, at its most astonishing, is often the life that refuses to follow the rules. One more part to go. One final thread to tie this together. Let's take one last look at the rule book, and then let it go. Somewhere in the still lakes near Mexico City, the axolotl floats, eternally young, calmly smiling, healing itself again. In the midnight depths, the anglerfish drifts with her glowing lure, her body fused with silent partners. In leaf-canopied streams, the glass frog's heartbeat pulses visibly beneath translucent skin, and deep in the soil of a forgotten rooftop, a tardigrade waits, immobile, ageless, unbreakable. These are not anomalies, they are stories. And together, they reveal something we often forget, that life is not bound by our expectations. It invents, it adapts, it redefines. What connects them all is not a shared ancestry or function. It is a pattern of refusal, a refusal to play by the rules we assumed were absolute. The blobfish shows us the cost of taking a creature out of context. The pangolin reveals that gentleness and strength are not opposites. The immortal jellyfish whispers that time is not a straight road. The pistol shrimp shatters silence with light, and the lyrebird, echoing the world around it, reminds us that memory can sing. These creatures are not mistakes. They are masterpieces, each one a living footnote in the great text of biology, challenging us to read more slowly, to think more deeply. And the rule they all break most profoundly is this, that survival has to look a certain way, that progress must follow a ladder, that beauty must be visible. What if the most advanced strategy is to stay young? What if the best way to resist time is to reset? What if camouflage is transparency? What if power is in silence, or mimicry, or standing completely still? In a world racing toward speed, scale, and spectacle, these animals whisper a different lesson. That patience can outlast violence. That stillness can outwit force. That strangeness is not weakness, but a different kind of wisdom. And so we reach the end not with answers, but with invitations, to listen more carefully, to look again, to leave space for wonder. Because if evolution has taught us anything through these rule breakers, it's this. Nature does not conform, it creates. And in that creation, it shows us what it means to truly live, not by copying what came before, but by daring to be something entirely, impossibly new. So here we are, at the end of the path, and back at the beginning. What does it mean to break the rules of evolution? Maybe the real question is, who wrote the rules in the first place? For centuries, we imagined evolution as a ladder, each rung climbing closer to perfection. But the animals we've met don't climb. They spiral. They pause. They rewrite. They survive, not by becoming something new, but by staying radically themselves. The axolotl said no to adulthood. The platypus assembled a mosaic of ancient traits and thrived. The tardigrade chose stillness over struggle. The anglerfish fused biology with loneliness and made it work. The lyrebird turned imitation into identity. Each one defies easy categorization, not as freaks, but as philosophers. What they teach us isn't just about biology. It's about humility. Every one of them is a living reminder that our assumptions about time, about growth, about what life should look like, are limited by the narrow window of our own experience. And yet, the deeper we look, the more the lines blur between what's old and what's new, between predator and partner, between aging and renewal. These creatures don't just survive, they remind us that survival itself is a form of art. one shaped by tension, by circumstance, by quiet acts of defiance. We came searching for anomalies. What we found were possibilities. And perhaps, if we truly listen, these creatures offer more than scientific curiosity. They offer a lens into our own lives. Because we too are shaped by unseen pressures. We too carry strange histories and unknown potentials. Maybe we are not as fixed as we think. So the question becomes, what if the future doesn't belong to those who follow the rules, but to those who, gently, curiously, question them? In the end, the story of life is not about the strongest, the fastest, or the most familiar. It's about resilience, about reinvention, about the quiet, astonishing power of being different. And that, perhaps, is the deepest truth of all, that the edge of what is possible is still unfolding.